same question, yes, about robot and sex industry.
Yeah, so, well, we know at the moment there's a huge commercial sex trade that trades in the bodies of human beings, primarily women, girls, and children, and then men. We know that these commercial sex industries are always pushing they want people within those industries to offer anything that a man is willing to buy, and most of the buyers of sexual abuse are men. But the industry itself must also reinvent itself, because it wants to keep, it kind of looks upon the prostituted a bit like its products. So it wants to keep thinking about how it can make its products appealing. And I think there's a fantasy around at the minute that robotics is developed enough that robots could replace, as I've said, people made claims about robots replacing friends or being your companion and being your therapist. And now people are saying, well, they could replace the prostituted. I think prostitution should be abolished. I think it's a sign that women don't have equality in society. It's negative for men because they get to look upon women as non-human, as subhuman, who they can abuse if they pay for it. So if I thought for a minute you could introduce sex robots into the prostitution trade and it would somehow eliminate prostitution and the abuse of women, I would happily support it. The reality is it won't. It will be just added to a new layer of distortion that already exists. So I'll give you a really good example. Prostitution has grown significantly in the last 50 years. In fact, it's become an industry unlike any other. Before, it was localized to cities and towns, around different countries. Now, with global tourism, globalization, more availability of pornography, decriminalization and legalization in some countries, basically there's a huge market for pornography and there's a huge market for prostitution. So the market has grown. So even in countries that have legalized prostitution or decriminalized prostitution, they've got a huge problem with sex trafficking, because they can't get volunteers into those industries. They literally have to coerce people into them to do the jobs. Now, at the same time, having sex, if you can introduce some novel technology into the sex industry, it won't eliminate those practices. All it will do is it will make those practices even more degrading to human beings than they currently are.
Another question is, that means that as the head of the initiative, you actively advocated that sex with the robot must be prohibited by law. Why? Who is supporting you in this? And how do you think it is possible to regulate such issue at the legislation level? What is to be prohibited and what is to be allowed?
Well, I think, once again, we're living in a society that says human beings are optional. Human relationship is optional. If you can't have your needs met by another human being, you can have your intimate human needs met by a machine or a robot or AI or something. That is not true. What this represents is the worst extreme of consumerism and commercialism. The very idea is estranging human beings from their intimate ties, their bonds with other human beings. And if that occurs, there will be two things that will happen in the short term quite significantly. One is increased human isolation. If you think loneliness is a problem now, watch that space, because it's about to turn into a bigger problem. When people aren't interacting with each other, when they can hide behind machines, and don't have to do stuff face to face, it means that they can be angry, insultive, abusive towards each other. So it means that human relationships will break down more widely. Because human beings actually do need each other, you need people to share your stories with, to feel touch, to hold, you know, to share experiences together. If you don't have those things, then your mental health issues will increase. You will become more agitated, more panicky, more disordered in your thinking and your way of being in the world. You will probably seek out more dangerous behaviours in order to, because your boundaries, where your boundaries are going to be, because if your boundaries aren't set by another human being, where are your boundaries going to be? Because how's the robot going to set your boundaries? They're not. So those are going to be two immediate effects that I would say I think is already happening in the world with the way people are using new technologies. I think the long-term effect will be a powerless people, very, very powerless, because at the moment there is huge inequalities in the world. There is huge opportunities to make political changes for the better for everybody. And the more you isolate people and individuate them and put them into their little boxes, the best chance you've got of never, ever, ever being able to change anything in society.
Next question is, and is there a robot helpers around the house? How do you think it's possible to find out whether the owner has sex with the robot or not?
Right.
And in your opinion, can the tendency of spreading sex robots be dangerous?
Right. Well, let me say something about sex. People get sexual pleasure from all kinds of objects in the world. You know, you may rub your penis on a chair. You may, you know, sit on a bicycle and enjoy the sensation. You're not having sex with an object when you do that, because when we talk about sex, we're talking about something mutual, right? When people have sex with each other, the classic term is called intercourse. And the idea of intercourse is it's happening between the people. If you rub your genitals on a robot Hoover, you're masturbating using an object. You're not having any sex. I mean, you're having a sexual experience, but it's not sexual intercourse. There is no mutuality present. And I think this needs to be really emphasized here. Even the term sex robots is very, very problematic. When I was thinking of renaming my campaign, because my campaign is the campaign against sex robots, because when I started looking at these issues, that's what they were called. But the reality is you can never have sex with a robot because it can't reciprocate. It can't have a mutual experience with you. But you can masturbate with it. You can use it as a masturbatory tool like a vibrator.
Another question is, there are social groups for which a sex robot is a way out. For example, people with disabilities. What do you think on this? And there was an article published recently about the Spanish programmer Sergi Santos, who announced that he was ready to create a robot capable of becoming pregnant.
Yeah.
How one can feel about that? Is that possible?
Oh, come on, is that possible? Of course it's not possible. The man is saying anything at all. You know, what he's doing, you see, what he's figured out is if you say stupid things about robots, people get very interested in what you say. And I remember, so I've been studying robots since 2001 now. I remember speaking to a robotic scientist who creates robots, actual physical robots, has a lab and has a lab group. And she said to me, if I wanted to get media attention, I would go to the press and I would say, I'm creating a robot child, right? She said, I would make an extravagant claim. She said, but I'm not doing, you know, I'm not going to do that because, well, you can't create a robot child anyway. So what we're seeing with him is really an opportunist who is he's really saying anything that comes into his head without any empirical validity to it whatsoever in order to get attention. So it's kind of misogynistic attention-seeking behavior. That's what it is. I mean, the reality is, if you go to a toy shop right now and you look at the dolls, you will probably find similar kinds of tech in those dolls. If you press their bellies, they go, oh, that tickles. If you stroke their hair, it goes, oh, that feels nice. I mean, for goodness sake, the manufacturers of those dolls didn't say those dolls had come to life. I think Sergei Santos should figure out, I don't know whether he knows this, but babies come from women. Maybe someone should let him know about that. They're called female humans. If I see him, I'll let him know.
Yeah, thanks. Another question. Can the passion for robots lead to the fact that humanity will degenerate? And now, is it known that the android robot Sophia obtained the citizenship of Saudi Arabia? What do you think about this?
Well, I think it didn't gain up citizenship. It was a kind of publicity stunt. But the fact that that company, Hanson Robotics, went to a country that denies women's rights in order to take a robot machine, and that robot machine was given more citizen status, right, than some of the women there, shows how misogynistic some of the creators behind these robots are. It shows that they don't value women very highly, that they're prepared to work with any governments, regardless of their human rights records in relation to women, that they're primarily concerned with their products, and if their misogynistic ideas are well received in countries like Saudi Arabia, then that's it, that's what they're more interested in.
Another question. After receiving rights along with people, can a robot